Well, it was a pretty much a foregone conclusion the court would take this case for two reasons. One is that split you talk about. Secondly, whenever the lower courts strike down part of a federal law, that makes it very important for the Supreme Court to hear the case. Now, the court today agreed to hear two cases. Hobby Lobby, in which the Hobby Lobby, the company won. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeals said yes, corporations can exercise freedom of religion. And then another case, the Third Circuit said another company, Conestoga Wood, which is in Pennsylvania, owned by a family of 5 Mennonites, the court ruled against them and said not only can the company not assert religious freedom, but the owners of the company can't sue and claim a damage because it's the corporation that has to pay for the contraceptive insurance, not the individual owners. So there's two questions the court will have then, basically. One is whether corporations have this right, and secondly, if they don't, as corporations, can the individual owners assert freedom of religion claims? By the way, on Hobby Lobby doesn't say we reject the entire contraceptive mandate. What they say is 4 elements of it, 4 things, 2 versions of the morning after pill, 2 kinds of IUDs they say would be tantamount to abortion, so they don't want to provide coverage for them. But you're right, it's a question the Supreme Court has never before addressed. Does a for-profit corporation, can it object to a federal law based on religious freedom? It's never answered that before, so that's one of the reasons why this is a big deal.
Yeah, a very big deal that they haven't answered it. And when you talk to Obama administration officials and folks at the Justice Department, they feel like they went out of their way to exempt purely religious nonprofit institutions. They really wanted to leave some space for them. And that goes, I think, Pete, to the question that you always look at in these oral arguments, which is the justices want to know where the rule ends. And so if you open this up on contraception, which is an area where people have strong religious views, where do you draw the rule? Because there are Christian Scientists or other faiths that might say they don't need to cover any health care.
Yes, and I think that is going to be the difficulty here. If the court, you noted the Citizens United case. I don't know whether this will hinge on that, but that is a case where the Supreme Court said corporations do have some constitutional rights. They have free speech rights. So the question is, do they have this constitutional right in addition? And if they do, then you're right. It's a line drawing problem, because then a company could say, well, because of our religious views, we are not going to serve gays, we're not going to accommodate Jews, or we're not going to take Muslims, or whatever. Then where do you draw the line on what a company can do and refuse to do based on constitutional freedom of religion grounds? Right, and those are tough limits where they would get well out beyond the statutory language of the ACA. They would have to find some limiting principle. Obviously going to be a big case that you'll be reporting on. Pete Williams, thanks for your time today. You bet. Let me go out directly to our panel here. Sally, you're shaking your head. What do you think of this breaking news?
Well, I mean, look, I'm glad the Supreme Court's going to settle this. The idea of giving religious freedom to corporations, I mean, listen, actually, if all of a sudden we decide that corporations have religion, then a lot of them have a lot of repenting to do for their sins. So that should be good to watch. This larger sort of phenomenon of you have a very small minority of religious folks, and we should be clear, a very small minority of religious folks in this country who, for instance, don't think there should be gay marriage because they don't want the views and wishes of others being imposed on them, at the same time want to be able to impose their views on others through things like denying contraceptive coverage to their employees. That just boggles the mind and contradicts everything we stand for as a free society.
Well, and I think you just hit that exact line that is confusing people about this, which is even beyond the corporate personhood thing, the corporations are people, my friend thing, there's also this confusion here where you say, well, wait a minute, what about the individual's rights, whether they're an employee or not? I want to read something from Justice Scalia in a case that touched on this back in 1990, where he said very simply, an individual's religious beliefs cannot excuse him from compliance with an otherwise valid law. And Michael, that has been the precedent for a very long time, that you have to follow the law even as it pertains to treating other people in the workplace, even if at home or at church you would do things differently.
You would think. You would think. By the way, I wanted to come out of the gate with that Mitt Romney quote. You beat me to it, but you are the host.
Guest host, Michael.
Yeah, of course, Alex, guest host. It's inconceivable to me, or very hard to conceive, that the Supreme Court can say that corporations have more religious freedom or more right to religious choice than individuals who work for them do. But this court may say it. This court, the conservative majority on this court, has granted lots of rights to corporations over the last few years, and found a lot of cases in corporations' favor. And this time we're not looking at Kennedy, we're looking at Roberts, right? As the swing person. And I could easily picture him changing back against the ACA on this matter.
Yeah, and Bob, a lot of this goes to the structure of the entire healthcare market and why these issues have been difficult, as we're all learning about it, right? About 48% of people get their health care through some sort of employer. Most of those employers, we should mention, probably don't want to go in and change the standards under the federal rules based on their religious affiliations of their executives, and yet you need rules of the road.
You need rules of the road, but this is another reason why we should have moved toward a single payer system of health coverage, because we're just going to end up with one challenge after another, whether it's in the courts or outside of the courts, and I don't see an end to this. But the other point that I'd like to make is this is the absurdity. We're already on the slippery slope of corporate personhood. So when you start giving them free speech rights as though they were individuals, and now suddenly we have a case where, or maybe not so suddenly, you have a case where they're asserting religious rights. Where does it end? This is a really important issue, and we know, I agree with Michael, you don't know what's going to happen with this court. It's a very pro-corporation court. So this is a very big deal.
If you look at one thing that's interesting here, if you look at the rhetoric that the companies have used and their lawyers have used in describing the rights of their owners, they describe their companies in a very particular way. They talk about the companies as an extension of their owner's will. And one of the things that's sort of at stake here, I think, is Bob points this out, is what is a corporation? Do we accept that when an entrepreneur, and we have this whole social ethos of the entrepreneur as hero, that when an entrepreneur goes out and manages to build a company of a few hundred people, he still has some claim on the ethical identity and essence of that company. That's in essence what these people are claiming. The counter argument to that is just that when you begin to build something that's broader, there are many different people who have a stake in it, and there's a more complicated ethics that pertains.
Yeah, and yet the line about corporations is complicated, right? I mean, Garrett Epps points this out in an article where he said, "Don't blame corporate personhood in the American prospect," which I should mention is somewhat liberal, and he says, look, corporations have always been, quote, persons. That is and always has been, in fact, the definition of a corporation under the law. It's a fictive person able to own property and enter into legal agreements. And Sally, people like it when corporations are treated as persons so you can sue them, yes, right? And there's a history for why that works. And yet, as Pete Williams was saying, and for those just joining us, we are reporting the Supreme Court will hear this big challenge to Obamacare and whether religious corporations can have a religious exemption. And yet there are ways that corporate personhood has always worked not only in favor of corporations.
Yeah, I mean, but look, the way our legal structures work in this country is for the benefit of being a corporation, and that is a benefit, that is a special category of rights that yes, it gives you certain obligations in terms of being able to be sued, but more you get certain benefits to incorporate as a corporation. Yes. In trade-off for that, you lose certain other freedoms. So you get all kinds of, there are tax benefits. I mean, let's not even forget the actual tax handouts that we give to all these corporations. Look, and the slippery slope here is we treat corporations so darn well in this country, maybe more people will just all, as individuals, we can incorporate. Why not? I mean, what's going to stop us, right? It's exactly true. We don't realize that this is a special legal class. It comes with trade-offs, and what these corporations are trying to do is kind of get both sides of the benefit. They want their cake and they want to eat it too.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point you make, and that's something the Obama Obama attorneys at DOJ and the Solicitor General's office are going to say, which is, look, if it is so important to you, if your number one goal is to organize a religious entity, then you really shouldn't be a for-profit. You should be a not-for-profit, and we exempted you, and we went out of our way to do that. And I know religious people in the administration who say they actually care about that, but that's religion, which is different than the stock market. So we're going to keep an eye on this case. It will be very interesting to see the oral arguments. Stay with us, because after the break, we have the storm, and it's just in time for Thanksgiving. Airports are bracing for rain, sleet, and snow across the country. We will get a live report on where the storm is heading and the latest on, yes, airport delays. That's up next on Now.